The whispers stung worse than the blistering Colorado sun as Serena Price passed the general store. She clutched her basket tighter against her calico dress, pretending not to hear the women's hushed voices. 3 years of marriage, they said. 3 years and still no child to show for it. Something must be wrong with her. Poor Isaac, one woman murmured, working his fingers to the bone on that ranch with no son to pass it to. Serena quickened her pace along the dusty main street of Las Animas, blinking back tears that threatened to spill. The year was 1875, and in this frontier town, a woman's worth was measured by the children she bore. At 26, the absence of little ones made her the subject of pity and speculation. She'd nearly reached the edge of town when Mrs. Montgomery, the banker's wife, stepped directly into her path. The woman's perfectly arranged gray curls and expensive dress were meant to intimidate, and they usually did. "Serena, dear," she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "I was just telling Reverend Phillips how we should add your situation to our prayer circle." Her eyes flickered down to Serena's flat stomach. Serena forced a smile. "That's very kind, Mrs. Montgomery, but I'm afraid I'm in a hurry. Isaac is expecting me home." "Of course, dear. I imagine he needs a hot meal after working so hard." The woman's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Such a shame he has no little ones to greet him when he returns." The words were carefully chosen barbs, each finding its mark. Serena nodded stiffly and hurried past, desperate to escape the town's judgment. The 3-mile walk back to their homestead gave her time to compose herself. She wouldn't let Isaac see her cry. Not again. He had enough burdens without carrying her sorrow too. Their modest ranch house came into view as she crested the hill. It wasn't much a 2-room cabin with a small barn and corral, but it was theirs. Isaac had built it with his own hands after they'd married, adding a second room for the children to come, he'd said with such certainty. She spotted him by the corral, his tall frame leaning against the fence as he watched their small herd of cattle. Even after 3 years of marriage, the sight of him still made her heart skip. His dark hair curled at the nape of his neck, and his shoulders stretched broad beneath his worn shirt. Isaac Walker had come west with nothing but determination and skill with horses. Now, at 30, he was building something from nothing, a dream they were supposed to share together with a family. He turned as she approached, his smile crinkling the corners of his eyes. "There's my girl," he called, meeting her halfway. He bent to kiss her cheek, then frowned, studying her face. "What's wrong?" "Nothing," she said too quickly, "just tired from the walk." Isaac took the basket from her arms. "You've been crying," Serena sighed. There was no hiding anything from him. It was just Mrs. Montgomery and her friends, the usual talk. His jaw tightened. "I've half a mind to ride into town and have a word with that woman." "And what good would that do?" Serena shook her head. "It would only give them more to gossip about." Inside their cabin, Serena busied herself unpacking her purchases while Isaac built up the fire in the stove. The silence between them was heavy with unspoken worries. "Dr. Miller was in town today," she finally said, her back to him as she arranged the flour and sugar in their proper places. "He asked how we were doing, if we had any news to share." Isaac's sigh was audible even across the room. "That man should mind his own business. He's a doctor, Isaac. Our health is his business." She turned to face him, gripping the edge of the table for support. "Maybe we should talk to him. Maybe there's something wrong with me that he could. There's nothing wrong with you." His voice was firm but gentle. He crossed the room in 2 strides and took her hands in his. "Nothing, you hear me. But 3 years, Isaac. 3 years, and not even a false hope." The tears she'd been holding back all day finally spilled down her cheeks. "The whole town pities you for being stuck with a barren wife. To hell with what they think." He wiped her tears with his thumb. "I didn't marry you for the children you could give me. I married you because I love you, because I can't imagine living one day of my life without you beside me." "But you deserve a family," she whispered. "A son to teach your ways, a daughter to dote on." Isaac was quiet for a long moment, his blue eyes searching her face. Then he smiled, that slow, sure smile that had first captured her heart. "Then we'll fill our home another way." Serena blinked in confusion. "What do you mean?" "I mean there are plenty of children in this world who need a home, Serena. Children without parents to love them. You're talking about adoption." The idea had never occurred to her. In Las Animas, family was blood. Lineage mattered. Why not? A child is a child. Love is love. His certainty was unwavering. God knows there are enough orphans out there who need good homes, especially after the war. Hope flickered in Serena's chest for the first time in months. "Do you really mean it?" "I've been thinking about it for some time now," he admitted. "I was waiting for the right moment to bring it up. I didn't want you to think I'd given up on us having our own." "Oh, Isaac." She threw her arms around his neck, burying her face against his chest. "I don't know what to say." He held her tight. "Say you'll think about it. That's all I'm asking." That night, as they lay in bed with moonlight streaming through the window, Serena listened to Isaac's steady breathing. She thought about children without homes, without love. Children who could become theirs in every way that mattered. For the first time in months, she fell asleep with hope in her heart. The next morning dawned clear and cool. Serena rose early, her mind made up. She would ride into town with Isaac and speak to Reverend Phillips about how they might go about adopting a child. She was humming as she prepared breakfast, and Isaac paused in the doorway, watching her with a smile. "Someone's in high spirits this morning," he said, crossing to the wash basin to splash water on his face. "I've been thinking about what you said." She flipped the bacon in the cast iron skillet. "About adoption." He dried his face on a towel, his expression carefully neutral. And I think you're right." She met his eyes across the room. "There are children who need homes. Who are we to deny them love just because they weren't born to us?" The smile that broke across Isaac's face was like the sunrise. "You mean it, with all my heart." She set down her spatula as he crossed to her, lifting her off her feet in a bear hug that made her laugh despite herself. "I love you, Serena Walker," he said, setting her down and pressing his forehead to hers. "I love you too." She pushed him away playfully. "Now let me finish breakfast before it burns." They rode into town together, plans forming between them. The orphan train was due to pass through Denver in 2 weeks. Perhaps they could make the journey, see if there was a child who needed them as much as they needed a child. Las Animas looked different to Serena that morning. The same dusty streets and weathered buildings, but her perspective had shifted. The women who had whispered behind their hands yesterday held no power over her today. At the church, Reverend Phillips listened to their plan with a thoughtful expression. The older man had been kind to them since they'd arrived in town, never joining in the speculation about their childless state. "Adoption is a noble calling," he said, stroking his white beard. "The good book tells us to care for widows and orphans, but I must warn you it won't be easy. People can be narrow-minded." "We're prepared for that," Isaac said firmly, his hand finding Serena's and squeezing it. "As it happens," the Reverend continued, "I received a letter just yesterday from the Sisters of Mercy in Denver. They're seeking homes for several children orphaned in a recent influenza outbreak." He shuffled through the papers on his desk. "Yes, here it is. They specifically asked if I knew of any good Christian couples who might be willing to open their homes." Serena felt a flutter of excitement. "How many children?" "5, according to the letter, ages 2 through 9. He peered at them over his spectacles. Would you be interested in making the journey to meet them? Isaac looked at Serena, a question in his eyes. She nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. We would, Isaac answered for both of them. How soon can we go? Plans were made quickly. They would leave the following day for Denver, a 2-day journey. Their neighbor, old Mr. Jenkins, agreed to look after their livestock while they were gone. That night, Serena could hardly sleep for the nervous excitement bubbling within her. A child, perhaps their child, was waiting in Denver. She imagined a little boy with Isaac's smile or a girl with curious eyes, ready to be loved. What if none of them takes to us? She whispered in the darkness. Isaac's arm tightened around her waist. Then we'll keep looking. The right child will find us, Serena, I believe that. His certainty calmed her, as it always did. Isaac had a way of making the impossible seem within reach. They departed at dawn, their wagon loaded with supplies for the journey. The late September air held a hint of the coming autumn, and Serena wrapped her shawl tighter as they headed north. What do you hope for? She asked Isaac as the miles rolled by. A boy or a girl, he considered this, his hand steady on the reins. I hadn't really thought about it. A child who needs us, I suppose. That's what matters. You'd be wonderful with a son, she said. Someone to teach your ways with horses. And you'd be wonderful with a daughter, he countered. Teaching her to bake those apple pies that make my mouth water just thinking about them. They laughed together, the sound carried away on the prairie wind. They made camp that night beneath a canopy of stars, and as Serena laid her head on Isaac's shoulder by the fire, she felt a peace she hadn't known in years. Whatever happened in Denver, they would face it together. The city came into view late the following afternoon. Serena had been to Denver only once before, shortly after their wedding, and it had grown considerably since then. Brick buildings stretched toward the sky, and the streets bustled with activity. The Sisters of Mercy Orphanage stood on a quiet street away from the main thoroughfare. It was a large, austere building of red brick, with a small chapel attached. A nun answered their knock, her kind face surrounded by the white of her habit. You must be the Walkers, she said, ushering them inside. Reverend Phillips sent a telegram to let us know you were coming. I'm Sister Margaret. She led them through a hallway into a modest office where an older nun sat at a desk. Mother Superior Agnes had weathered features but kind eyes that studied them carefully as Sister Margaret made the introductions. So you wish to adopt, she said once they were seated. Yes, Mother Superior, Isaac replied. We've been blessed with a good home and love to give, but no children of our own. The woman's gaze softened. The Lord works in mysterious ways. Sometimes he leads children to parents through paths we don't expect. She shuffled through some papers on her desk. We have 5 children currently without homes, 3 brothers who we would prefer to place together if possible, ages 9, 7, and 4. Then there's a little girl of 6 and a boy of 2. Serena's heart raced. 5 children, all needing homes. How could they possibly choose? Could we meet them? She asked softly. Mother Agnes nodded. Of course. They're in the playroom now. Sister Margaret will take you. The playroom was a large, sunlit space with simple wooden toys scattered about. 5 children looked up as they entered, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and wariness. Sister Margaret introduced them. Children, these are Mr. and Mrs. Walker. They've come to visit with you. The oldest boy, William, age 9, stepped forward protectively, his younger brothers flanking him. His chin jutted out with a defiance that barely masked his fear. The little girl, Emma, clutched a worn rag doll to her chest, her big brown eyes wary. And in the corner, playing with wooden blocks, sat the 2-year-old boy, Thomas, seemingly oblivious to their arrival. Serena's heart ached for all of them, but it was Thomas who drew her attention most strongly. His dark curls fell across his forehead as he concentrated on stacking his blocks, his chubby fingers working with determination. Isaac knelt down beside the three brothers, speaking to them in the same gentle tone he used with skittish colts. "That's quite a tower you're building," he said to the middle boy, who was working on a structure of wooden blocks. Slowly, cautiously, the children began to warm to them. William remained standoffish, but his younger brothers, James and Michael, ventured closer to show Isaac their toys. Emma approached Serena timidly, offering her doll for inspection. "Her name is Lily," the girl whispered. "She's beautiful," Serena said, carefully holding the doll. "Does she have a favorite game to play?" Emma's face brightened slightly. "She likes tea parties." "What a coincidence, so do I." As they talked, Serena kept glancing toward Thomas. The little boy still played alone, though he occasionally looked their way with solemn eyes. Sister Margaret eventually called the older children to their lessons, leaving Serena and Isaac alone with Thomas. Serena approached him slowly, sitting on the floor a short distance away. "Hello, Thomas," she said softly. The boy looked up, his dark eyes serious in his round face. He held out a block to her. "For me, thank you." She accepted it solemnly, then placed it atop his tower. A smile flickered across his face. Isaac joined them, and soon they were all building together. Thomas didn't speak, but he moved closer to Serena as they played, eventually leaning against her side as fatigue overtook his excitement. "He's taken quite a shine to you," Sister Margaret said from the doorway. "Thomas hasn't been with us long. His mother died in childbirth, and his father passed from influenza 3 months ago." Serena looked down at the drowsy child leaning against her, her heart opening in a way she hadn't expected. "Has he always been so quiet?" He spoke a bit when he first arrived, but he's fallen silent these past weeks. The doctor says it's not uncommon for children who have suffered such loss. The nun's expression was compassionate. They protect themselves in whatever ways they can. Isaac met Serena's eyes over the child's head. Something unspoken passed between them, a recognition, a decision. "Could we speak with Mother Agnes again?" Isaac asked. Back in the office, they sat across from the Mother Superior, Thomas now asleep in Serena's arms. The boy had refused to be parted from her, clinging to her neck when Sister Margaret tried to take him for his nap. "I see young Thomas has made his preference clear," Mother Agnes said with a small smile. "We'd like to adopt him," Isaac said, his voice sure, "if you'll allow it." The nun studied them thoughtfully. "Adoption is a serious commitment, Mr. Walker. This child has already lost 2 parents. He couldn't bear to lose another." "We understand," Serena said, her arms tightening protectively around the sleeping boy. "We'll love him as our own. He'll want for nothing we can provide. And you're prepared for the challenges. A child who has experienced trauma may have difficult days ahead." "We're prepared," Isaac assured her. "Whatever he needs, whatever it takes." Mother Agnes nodded slowly. "I believe you are sincere, and it's clear the child has formed an attachment." She pulled a form from her desk drawer. "There will be paperwork, of course, and a small fee for the orphanage." "Whatever is required," Isaac said, reaching for Serena's hand. As Mother Agnes explained the process, Serena looked down at the sleeping child in her arms. His dark lashes rested against his cheeks, his breathing deep and even. She'd never held anything so precious. "We'll need to prepare before we take him home," she said quietly. "We don't have any children's things." "There's a dry goods store 2 streets over," Sister Margaret suggested, "and Thomas can remain here while you make your preparations. It will take a day or 2 to complete the paperwork anyway." They spent the remainder of the day in Denver, purchasing everything they thought a small boy might need: clothes, a few simple toys, a small bed that Isaac would need to assemble. The shopkeeper's wife cooed over their story, wrapping their purchases with extra care. "First-time parents," she said with a knowing smile. "You'll be back for more before the week is out, mark my words." That night, in the small hotel room they'd rented, Serena sat by the window watching the city lights, her mind racing with plans and worries. "What if we're not enough?" she asked softly. "What if he needs more than we can give?" Isaac sat beside her, taking her hand in his. "We'll learn as we go, just like any parents, and we'll love him. That's the most important thing." "He doesn't speak," she reminded him. "The nun said he's traumatized. Then we'll be patient. We'll show him he's safe, that he can trust us." Isaac's voice held the same steady confidence that had first drawn her to him. "We can do this, Serena. Together." The next morning they returned to the orphanage with their paperwork completed. Thomas was waiting in the playroom, and his face lit up when he saw Serena. He toddled toward her on unsteady legs, arms outstretched. She swept him up, breathing in the scent of soap and little boy. "Hello, sweetheart," she murmured against his curls. "Would you like to come home with us?" The child didn't answer, but he laid his head on her shoulder, one small hand patting her back as if to comfort her. Mother Agnes watched the interaction with approval. "I believe God has brought the right child to the right parents," she said. "May He bless your family." The journey home was slower with a small child, but Thomas proved to be a good traveler. He sat between them on the wagon seat, pointing at birds and clouds with obvious delight, though he still didn't speak. They reached Las Animas late on the third day. Serena felt a moment of trepidation as they approached town. What would people say? How would they explain? Isaac seemed to read her thoughts. "Head high," he said quietly. "We've nothing to be ashamed of." The town was quiet as they passed through, though a few curious faces appeared in windows. Mrs. Jenkins, the neighbor's wife, was waiting at their homestead as arranged. Her eyes widened at the sight of Thomas. "Well now," she said as they climbed down from the wagon. "Who's this little gentleman?" "This is Thomas," Isaac said proudly. "Our son." The word sent a thrill through Serena. "Our son." It felt right in a way she couldn't explain. Mrs. Jenkins recovered quickly from her surprise. "Well, isn't he handsome? Those curls are just like yours, Mr. Walker." It was true, Serena realized. With his dark hair and solemn expression, Thomas could easily pass for Isaac's child by blood. Not that it mattered to them, but it might make things easier in town. The older woman had prepared a meal for their return, and she bustled about helping them settle in while Isaac unloaded their purchases. Thomas stayed close to Serena, his eyes taking in the unfamiliar surroundings. That night, after they'd set up his small bed in the second room, Serena sat rocking him to sleep. She sang softly, an old lullaby her own mother had sung to her. Thomas's eyes grew heavy, but before he drifted off completely, he reached up to touch her cheek. "Mama," he whispered, the word barely audible. Serena's heart nearly stopped. "Yes, sweetheart," she managed through sudden tears. "I'm your mama now." He nodded, seemingly satisfied, and closed his eyes. When she told Isaac what had happened, he wrapped his arms around both of them, his own eyes suspiciously bright. "See, we're already a family." The first weeks were a period of adjustment for all of them. Thomas had nightmares that left him screaming in the night. He followed Serena like a shadow during the day, panicking if she moved out of his sight. And he spoke only rarely, single words that he seemed to parcel out like precious gifts. But there were moments of pure joy too. The first time Thomas laughed a full-bellied giggle when Isaac pretended to fall off his chair at dinner. The morning he woke up dry-eyed from a peaceful sleep. The afternoon he toddled out to the corral with Isaac, solemnly helping to feed the horses. Word had spread quickly through Las Animas about the Walkers' adopted son. Some reactions were kind. Mrs. Jenkins brought over a quilt she'd made for the little fellow, and Reverend Phillips paid a special visit to bless their new family. Others were less charitable. Serena overheard whispers when she took Thomas to the general store, speculation about why they'd really adopted, questions about the child's background and health. Mrs. Montgomery was the most direct. She cornered Serena outside the church one Sunday, her eyes narrowing as she took in Thomas's appearance. "I understand congratulations are in order," she said, her voice carrying just far enough for others to hear. "Though I must say, adoption is such an unusual choice. One never knows what tendencies a child might have inherited." Serena felt a familiar flush of shame, but it was quickly replaced by protective anger. She straightened her spine, meeting the older woman's gaze directly. "We know exactly what tendencies our son has inherited, Mrs. Montgomery. He has his father's kindness and his mother's determination. The rest will help shape with love." She smiled tightly. "Now, if you'll excuse us, my husband is waiting." She walked away with her head high, Thomas's small hand in hers. Isaac, who had witnessed the exchange from a distance, wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "That's my girl," he murmured against her hair. As the weeks turned to months, Thomas blossomed under their care. His vocabulary expanded, though he remained a thoughtful child who chose his words carefully. He developed a special bond with Isaac, trailing after him as he worked around the ranch, soaking up knowledge like a sponge. His nightmares grew less frequent, though they never disappeared entirely. On bad nights, he would crawl into bed between Serena and Isaac, finding comfort in their presence. Spring came to Colorado, bringing new life to the ranch. The cattle had calved, and Thomas delighted in the wobbly new additions to their herd. He was nearly 3 now, growing like a weed and talking in complete sentences. "Mama, look." He called one bright April morning, pointing to a robin building a nest in the oak tree outside the kitchen window. "Baby birds coming soon." Serena smiled at his excitement. "That's right, sweetheart. The mama robin is making a home for her babies." Thomas considered this with his characteristic seriousness. "Like you and Papa made a home for me," her heart swelled. Exactly like that. Later that week, Isaac returned from town with news. The orphan train would be passing through Las Animas in June, bringing children from eastern cities to be placed with families in western territories. "I thought perhaps." He began hesitantly over dinner, his eyes meeting Serena's. "Thomas might like a brother or sister someday." Serena looked at their son, happily mashing potatoes on his plate, and felt a surge of love so strong it nearly took her breath away. "What do you think, Thomas? Would you like a brother or sister to play with?" The boy considered the question with endearing seriousness. "Yes," he finally declared. "A sister. Brothers are too noisy." Isaac laughed, ruffling the boy's hair. "I'll see what we can do, partner, but we don't get to choose. Whoever needs us, that's who will come." As spring turned to summer, preparations began for the orphan train's arrival. The town council had decided to make it an event, with families from surrounding areas invited to consider adoption. Reverend Phillips approached them after church one Sunday. "The committee would be grateful if you'd speak to the prospective parents," he said. "Your experience could be valuable to those considering adoption for the first time." Isaac looked to Serena, who nodded. "We'd be happy to help." The day of the orphan train's arrival dawned bright and clear. The town was bustling with activity as families gathered at the train station. Thomas, dressed in his Sunday best, held tightly to Serena's hand as they waited. "Remember, sweetheart," she reminded him gently. "We're just here to help today. We don't know yet if we'll be bringing a new brother or sister home." He nodded solemnly. "But we can look, right, Mama?" "Yes, we can look." The train arrived with a cloud of steam and a screech of brakes. The children who descended ranged from infants carried by nurses to teenagers who looked around warily at their new surroundings. There were about 20 in all, their faces a mixture of fear, hope, and resignation. A tall woman in a sensible traveling suit introduced herself as Miss Collins, a representative of the Children's Aid Society. "These children have been carefully selected," she told the assembled crowd. "They are healthy, of good moral character, and eager to become part of loving families." The potential parents were invited to meet the children in the town hall, where tables had been set up with refreshments. It was a strange sort of market, Serena thought uncomfortably, with children trying to present their best selves and adults shopping for the perfect addition to their families. She and Isaac moved among the groups, answering questions from hesitant couples, offering encouragement and honest advice about the challenges and joys of adoption. Thomas stayed close to Serena at first, shy among so many strangers, but gradually he began to watch the other children with interest. His attention kept returning to a corner where a little girl sat alone, apart from the others. She was small, perhaps 4 or 5, with auburn hair pulled back in 2 neat braids. Unlike the other children who were actively engaging with potential parents, she sat quietly, her hands folded in her lap, watching the proceedings with solemn eyes. "Who's that, Mama?" Thomas asked, tugging on Serena's skirt and pointing. "I don't know, sweetheart. Should we go find out?" They approached the girl together. Up close, Serena could see that her dress, while clean, was patched and too big for her slender frame. Her face was delicate with a sprinkling of freckles across her nose. "Hello," Serena said gently, kneeling to the girl's level. "My name is Mrs. Walker, and this is my son, Thomas. What's your name?" The girl studied them for a long moment before answering. "Sarah," she said softly. "Sarah Miller." "It's nice to meet you, Sarah. Would you like to join us for some lemonade?" The child hesitated, then nodded. As they walked to the refreshment table, Miss Collins intercepted them. "I see you've met Sarah," she said in a low voice. "I should tell you she's had a difficult journey. Her mother died last winter and her father." She glanced at the children, then continued carefully. "He was not a suitable parent. Sarah hasn't spoken much since we took her into our care." Something in Serena's chest tightened. A child who had known cruelty instead of love. A child who protected herself with silence, just as Thomas once had. "How old is she?" she asked. 5, according to her papers. She's bright, but she'll need patience and understanding." Miss Collins looked between Serena and Thomas. "Your son seems taken with her." It was true. Thomas had moved closer to the girl, offering her his cookie with the open generosity of childhood. After a moment's hesitation, she accepted it with a tiny smile. Isaac joined them, his expression softening as he observed the children. "Making friends, partner?" he asked Thomas. "This is Sarah," Thomas announced. "She's 5. Isaac knelt down, offering the girl his hand with the same respect he'd show an adult. "Pleased to meet you, Miss Sarah. I'm Mr. Walker." She shook his hand solemnly, her eyes studying his face with a child's directness. "You have a horse," she stated, pointing to the dust on his boots. Isaac grinned. "I do indeed. Several, in fact. Do you like horses?" A nod, cautious but definite. "Would you like to see pictures of them? I carry a photograph in my pocket." Another nod, more enthusiastic this time. As Isaac showed the child his prized photograph, Serena caught his eye over the children's heads. The question in his gaze matched the one in her heart. Later, as the event wound down and families began to make arrangements with Miss Collins, Serena, Isaac, and Thomas said goodbye to Sarah. The girl's face fell, though she tried to hide her disappointment. "Will you come back tomorrow?" Thomas asked her. "The train leaves tomorrow afternoon," Miss Collins explained gently. Any children who haven't found homes will continue to the next stop. Thomas looked stricken. But Sarah needs a home now. The adults exchanged glances. Thomas, remember what we discussed, Serena began carefully. We can't just, you said whoever needs us, the boy interrupted, looking up at Isaac with earnest eyes. Sarah needs us, Papa, I can tell. Isaac knelt to his son's level. This is a big decision, partner. Are you sure you want a sister? Thomas nodded firmly. She can have half my toys, and I'll teach her about the horses. Isaac looked up at Serena, a question in his eyes. She felt a moment of fear. Could they handle another child, especially one who had known trauma? But it was quickly replaced by certainty. This felt right, just as Thomas had felt right from the first moment. Miss Collins, she said, her voice steady. We'd like to discuss adopting Sarah, if that's possible. The woman's face brightened. I was hoping you might. She needs a stable home with experience handling children who have had difficult starts. She glanced at Sarah, who was showing Thomas a small wooden doll she kept in her pocket. And it seems the children have already formed a bond. The paperwork took longer this time, with more questions about their ability to care for two children. But by the next afternoon, as the orphan train prepared to depart with considerably fewer passengers than it had arrived with, Sarah Miller became Sarah Walker. She was quiet on the ride home, her few possessions bundled in a small carpet bag on her lap. Thomas chattered enough for both of them, pointing out landmarks and telling her about the ranch with a big brother's authority. And you can have the bed by the window, he informed her, so you can see the stars at night. Sarah nodded, her eyes wide as she took in the vast Colorado landscape. When they finally arrived at the ranch, she hesitated before descending from the wagon. Is this all yours? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. It's all ours, Isaac corrected gently. Yours too now. He carried her carpet bag while Serena showed the girl to the room she would share with Thomas. They had hastily prepared a second bed, and Mrs. Jenkins had contributed another of her handmade quilts, this one in shades of green and yellow. Is this really for me? Sarah asked, running her small hand over the colorful fabric. All yours, Serena confirmed. Mrs. Jenkins made it special for you. The child's eyes filled with tears. I never had my own bed before. Serena's heart ached. She sat on the edge of the bed, careful not to crowd the girl. Sarah, sweetheart, this is your home now. Everything you need we'll provide. Everything you're afraid of we'll protect you from, I promise. Sarah studied her face, searching for truth in the way only children can. Forever, even if I'm bad, forever, Serena affirmed. And we don't believe in bad children in this house. Sometimes people make mistakes or have big feelings, but that doesn't make them bad. The girl considered this, then nodded as if coming to a decision. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the small wooden doll she'd shown Thomas earlier. This is Lucy, she said, holding it out. My mama made her for me before she got sick. You can hold her if you want. It was a gesture of trust so profound it brought tears to Serena's eyes. Thank you, Sarah. I'll be very careful with her. She accepted the doll, examining it with appropriate solemnity before handing it back. She's beautiful, just like you. Sarah tucked the doll back into her pocket, then surprised Serena by stepping forward and wrapping her arms around her waist in a quick hug before darting away to join Thomas, who was calling from outside. That night, after the children were asleep, Serena and Isaac sat on the porch watching the stars emerge. His arm was around her shoulders, her head resting against him in comfortable silence. Two children, she finally said. If anyone had told me a year ago, are you happy? He asked, his voice rumbling beneath her ear. Happier than I ever thought possible. She tilted her face up to his. You gave me this, Isaac. You gave me a family when I thought I'd never have one. He kissed her softly. We gave each other a family. And there's plenty of room for it to grow, if that's what we want. The next few months brought challenges as Sarah adjusted to her new life. She had nightmares worse than Thomas's had been, waking the household with her screams. She hoarded food, hiding pieces of bread and apples under her bed for later. And she flinched whenever Isaac raised his voice, even if it was in laughter. But there was progress, too. The first time she laughed a musical sound that made Thomas beam with pride at having caused it. The day she forgot to flinch when Isaac reached to help her down from the porch. The morning Serena found her showing her doll to one of the barn cats, chattering away when she thought no one could hear. By Christmas, Sarah was a different child. Still quiet compared to Thomas, but with a confidence that showed in the way she now moved through the world. She had developed a special bond with Isaac, following him around the ranch just as Thomas did, asking thoughtful questions about the animals and the land. She has a way with horses, Isaac told Serena one evening. Natural instinct for what they're thinking. Like her father, Serena teased. He grinned. She's going to be a fine horsewoman someday. The town's attitude toward their unconventional family had gradually shifted. There were still those who disapproved Mrs. Montgomery among them, but most had come to accept the Walker children as part of the community. It helped that both Thomas and Sarah were bright, well-behaved children who charmed almost everyone they met. It was easy to forget they hadn't been born to Serena and Isaac when they so clearly belonged with them. Spring came again, marking a year since Thomas had first pointed out the robin's nest. The children were helping Serena in the garden when Thomas asked the question she'd been expecting. "Mama, why didn't I grow in your tummy like Jimmy Wilson grew in his mama's tummy?" Serena sat back on her heels, brushing dirt from her hands. "Well, sometimes children grow in their mama's hearts instead of their tummies. That's what happened with you and Sarah." "But why?" Sarah asked, abandoning her small watering can to join the conversation. Serena considered her answer carefully. "God knew you both needed a family, and He knew Papa and I needed children to love. So He brought us together, even though we didn't start out together." "But you wanted babies in your tummy," Thomas persisted. "Mrs. Montgomery said so. She told Mrs. Wilson you couldn't have real children, that's why you had to take us instead." Serena felt a flash of anger at the woman's cruelty, but kept her voice calm. "Mrs. Montgomery doesn't understand something very important. Love is what makes a real family, not how the family comes together." "So we're real?" Sarah asked in a small voice. As real can be," Isaac answered from behind them. He'd approached quietly, catching the end of the conversation. He sat on the ground, gathering both children onto his lap despite the dirt they were tracking onto his clean shirt. "In fact, you two are the most real things in our lives." Thomas seemed satisfied with this answer, but Sarah still looked troubled. "My first papa said I wasn't really his," she confessed quietly. "That's why he didn't want me." Serena's heart broke at the matter-of-fact way the child delivered this cruelty. She moved closer, putting her arms around all three of them. "Your first papa was wrong about many things, Sarah. But he was especially wrong about you. You are wonderful and worthy of love exactly as you are. And you are ours," Isaac added firmly. "Both of you, forever and always." That night, after the children were asleep, Serena found Isaac still awake, staring out the window at the star-filled sky. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, slipping her arms around his waist from behind. "How lucky we are." He turned to face her, his expression serious. "And how different our lives would be if we'd gotten what we thought we wanted instead of what we needed." She understood immediately. "If I'd been able to have children naturally, we might never have found Thomas and Sarah." He brushed a strand of hair from her face. I used to pray for a miracle, Serena. I never realized the miracle would come in such an unexpected form. 2 forms, she corrected with a smile. And who knows? Perhaps there are more miracles waiting. The question hung between them, not needing an answer just yet. They had time. Their family would grow in whatever way it was meant to. As summer approached, Serena began to feel unwell. At first, she dismissed it as a passing illness, too much sun while gardening, perhaps, or something she'd eaten. But when the nausea persisted, occurring reliably each morning, a suspicion began to form. She said nothing to Isaac, not wanting to raise hopes that might be dashed. Instead, she rode into town alone one day while the children were helping him repair the chicken coop. Dr. Miller's office was quiet when she arrived. The doctor, a kind man in his 50s who had delivered most of the children in Las Animas, listened to her symptoms with increasing interest. "How long has it been since your monthly cycle, Mrs. Walker?" he asked, making notes in his ledger. Serena calculated silently. "Nearly 2 months now, but that's not unusual for me. I've never been regular." He nodded thoughtfully. "Any tenderness in your chest?" "Fatigue beyond what's normal for you?" "Yes to both." Her heart began to race. "Doctor, do you think?" He set down his pencil, regarding her with kind eyes. "I think it's very likely you're expecting a child, Mrs. Walker." The room seemed to tilt slightly. "But that's impossible. We've been married 6 years with no sign of." "Nature works in mysterious ways," he said. "Sometimes the body needs time, and sometimes," he hesitated, choosing his words carefully, "sometimes when we stop focusing so intensely on a goal, it comes to us naturally." "You think because we adopted, because the pressure was off?" "I think stress affects the body in ways we're only beginning to understand," he smiled. "But whatever the reason, I believe congratulations are in order." Serena rode home in a daze, her mind racing with questions and plans. How would Isaac react? Would the children feel threatened by a new baby? Was she even capable of carrying a child to term? She found the family in the barn, Isaac showing the children how to mend a piece of tack. The sight of them together, her husband's dark head bent next to Thomas's identical curls, Sarah's small hands carefully mimicking Isaac's movements, filled her with so much love it nearly overwhelmed her. "Mama," Thomas spotted her first, running to greet her. "Papa's teaching us to fix bridles." She hugged him tightly. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. A very useful skill." Sarah approached more slowly, studying Serena's face with her characteristic perception. "Are you feeling better, Mama? You looked sick at breakfast." Serena smoothed a hand over the girl's auburn braid. "Much better, thank you for asking." Isaac's eyes met hers over the children's heads, a question in them. She gave a small nod. "Yes, we'll talk later." That evening, after the children were asleep, she found him on the porch swing, a place they often sat to talk over the day's events. He moved over to make room for her, his arm automatically going around her shoulders. "What did the doctor say?" he asked without preamble. She took a deep breath, suddenly nervous. "Isaac, do you remember what you said the night we decided to adopt Thomas, about God working in mysterious ways?" He nodded, watching her face carefully. "It seems he had one more surprise in store for us." She took his hand, placing it on her still flat stomach. "I'm going to have a baby." For a moment, he didn't react, his expression frozen in disbelief. Then his face transformed with a joy so pure it brought tears to her eyes. "A baby," he whispered. "You're sure?" "Dr. Miller is. He says I'm about 2 months along." Isaac pulled her close, his face buried in her hair. She could feel him trembling slightly, his breathing uneven. "I don't know what to say," he finally managed. "Except thank you. For everything, for being patient with me when I suggested adoption, for loving our children so completely, for never giving up." I should be thanking you, she said, drawing back to look into his eyes. You gave me a family when I thought I would never have one, and now our family grows again. He laid his hand gently on her stomach. I can hardly believe it. I'm a little scared, she admitted. What if something goes wrong, and what about the children? How will they feel? One day at a time, he soothed. We'll face whatever comes together, just like we always have. They decided to wait until she was further along before telling the children, but Sarah, observant as always, noticed the changes in Serena before the first trimester was complete. Are you sick, Mama? She asked one morning when she found Serena retching behind the house. Should I get Papa? Serena wiped her mouth, considering her options. She'd planned to wait another month, but Sarah's worried expression decided her. I'm not sick, sweetheart, not really. Come sit with me for a minute. There's something I want to tell you. They sat on the back step, the morning sun warm on their faces. Do you remember how we talked about some babies growing in their mama's tummies? Serena began. Sarah nodded, her eyes widening as understanding dawned. Is there a baby in your tummy, Mama? There is, a little brother or sister for you and Thomas. The girl was quiet for a long moment, her face unreadable. Then she asked, will you love the baby more because it grew in your tummy? Serena's heart ached at the question. Oh, Sarah, no, never. Love doesn't work that way. It's not divided. When it's shared, it multiplies. Like numbers, exactly like numbers. When I had no children, I had all this love with nowhere to go. Then Thomas came and my love grew to include him. Then you came and it grew again. Now there will be a new baby and my love will grow once more. She took the girl's hand. But the love I have for you and Thomas won't get smaller to make room. It will stay just as big as it is now, which is bigger than the whole sky. Sarah considered this, then nodded solemnly. Can I tell Thomas about the baby? Let's tell him together. And then we can all think about how to get ready for the new arrival. Thomas took the news with typical enthusiasm, immediately peppering Serena with questions about when the baby would arrive and whether it would be a boy or a girl. We won't know if it's a brother or sister until the baby is born, she explained, but it should arrive around Christmas time. A Christmas baby. Thomas was delighted by the idea. Can we name it Holly if it's a girl or Nicholas if it's a boy? Serena laughed. We'll consider those names, along with some others. As Serena's pregnancy progressed, the children's excitement grew. They helped prepare the small nursery, moving their own beds closer together to make room for the cradle Isaac was building. Thomas talked endlessly about all the things he would teach the baby, while Sarah quietly collected soft scraps of fabric to make a quilt under Mrs. Jenkins's guidance. The town's reaction was mixed. Many offered sincere congratulations, especially those who had witnessed Serena's previous pain. Others, like Mrs. Montgomery, were less gracious. Well, isn't this a surprise? The banker's wife said when she encountered Serena at the general store, her eyes moving critically over Serena's expanding waistline. After all this time, one might almost think there was never anything wrong with you at all. Serena had long since stopped allowing the woman to affect her. God's timing is perfect, Mrs. Montgomery. Our family is growing exactly as it should. Yes, well, I suppose those adopted children will need someone to look after them when you're busy with your real baby. The casual cruelty of the remark took Serena's breath away. Before she could respond, a voice spoke from behind her. Excuse me, Mrs. Montgomery, but I couldn't help overhearing. Mrs. Jenkins stepped forward, her usually mild face set in hard lines. And I feel compelled to correct a misconception. All three of the Walker children are real. They're real in their parents' hearts, real in this community, and real in the eyes of God. I'd thank you to remember that before speaking ill of a family that has shown nothing but love and generosity. The banker's wife flushed an unbecoming shade of red. "I meant no offense," she muttered before hurrying away. "Thank you," Serena said softly when they were alone. Mrs. Jenkins patted her arm. "No thanks needed, dear. That woman has been in need of a talking to for years." She smiled warmly. "Now, how are you feeling? The little one giving you much trouble?" As autumn turned the prairie golden, Serena's belly grew round and firm. The baby was active, especially at night, kicking and rolling in a way that made it difficult for her to sleep. Isaac would often place his hand on her stomach, marveling at the strength of the movements. "Strong like their mama," he'd say, pressing a kiss to her temple. The children were fascinated by the visible evidence of the baby's movements. Thomas liked to rest his head against Serena's belly, talking to his unborn sibling about all the adventures they would have together. Sarah was more reserved but no less interested, asking thoughtful questions about how the baby ate and breathed inside the womb. December arrived with a bitter cold snap that kept the family close to home. The children's excitement mounted as both Christmas and the baby's arrival drew near. Isaac hung mistletoe and holly around the house, and Thomas insisted on placing a small cradle next to the Christmas tree so baby can see the decorations. On the morning of December 21st, Serena woke to a sharp pain radiating across her lower back. She lay still, waiting to see if it would return. When it did, several minutes later, she knew it was time. "Isaac," she whispered, not wanting to wake the children in the next room, "I think the baby's coming." He was instantly alert, years of ranching having trained him to wake quickly. "Are you sure? It's not due for another week." "Babies come when they're ready, not according to our schedules." She grimaced as another pain began to build. "Could you send Thomas to fetch Mrs. Jenkins, and then ride for Dr. Miller?" Isaac dressed hurriedly, his fingers fumbling with buttons in his haste. "I don't want to leave you alone." "I won't be alone. Thomas and Sarah will be here, and Mrs. Jenkins isn't far." She managed a smile despite her discomfort. "This isn't my first time being in a house with a laboring woman, remember? I helped deliver Jimmy Wilson last spring." He kissed her before leaving, his eyes full of concern and love. "I'll be back as quickly as I can." The children were surprised to be woken so early, but quickly rose to the occasion. Thomas dressed in record time and set off for the Jenkins farm, while Sarah stayed to help Serena. "What should I do, Mama?" she asked, her small face serious with responsibility. "Could you bring me some water, sweetheart? And then maybe sit with me for a while," the girl complied, carefully carrying a cup of water to Serena's bedside. Then she climbed onto the bed, her warm weight a comfort against Serena's side. "Does it hurt very badly?" she asked, watching Serena's face as another contraction built. Serena tried to keep her expression neutral, not wanting to frighten the child. "It does hurt," she admitted, "but it's a purposeful kind of pain. It's bringing the baby closer to us." Sarah nodded thoughtfully. "Like when Papa had to set Thomas's arm when he fell from the hayloft. It hurt him, but it helped him get better." "That's exactly right," Serena managed through gritted teeth as the contraction peaked. "Very perceptive, sweetheart." Mrs. Jenkins arrived within the hour, her experienced hands checking Serena's progress with brisk efficiency. "Not far along yet," she pronounced. "First babies often take their time. Try to rest between pains if you can." The morning passed slowly, the labor intensifying as the sun climbed higher. Isaac returned with Dr. Miller just before noon, his face etched with worry until the doctor assured him everything was progressing normally. "The children should wait in the other room now," Dr. Miller suggested as he washed his hands. "Labor is about to get more intense." Thomas protested being separated from the action, but Sarah took his hand. "Come on," she said with unusual authority. We need to stay out of the way so the baby can come safely. The afternoon stretched into evening as Serena's labor progressed. Outside, snow began to fall, dusting the prairie with white. Inside, the small house was warm with the heat of the stove and filled with the sounds of Serena's labor. "You're doing wonderfully," Mrs. Jenkins encouraged, wiping Serena's forehead with a cool cloth. "Not much longer now." Dr. Miller checked her progress again and nodded. "The baby has moved down nicely. When you feel the next pain, I want you to push." Isaac supported her as she bore down, his strength steadying her. "You're the strongest woman I know," he murmured against her hair. "You can do this." The pain was like nothing Serena had ever experienced, a tearing pressure that made her cry out despite her resolve to be quiet for the children's sake. But with each contraction, with each push, she felt the baby moving closer to the world. "I can see the head," Dr. Miller announced. Dark hair, like its father's. With a final, monumental effort, Serena pushed through the burning pain, and suddenly there was a slithering sensation followed by a blessed relief. A moment of silence, and then the most beautiful sound, a lusty cry that filled the small room. "A boy," the doctor announced, placing the squirming, red-faced infant on Serena's chest. "A fine, healthy boy." Serena looked down at her son, their son, in wonder. He was perfect, from his thatch of dark hair to his tiny clenched fists. Isaac leaned close, his face wet with tears as he touched the baby's cheek with a gentle finger. "Hello, little man," he whispered. "We've been waiting for you." After the afterbirth was delivered and both mother and baby had been cleaned up, the door to the bedroom opened a crack. Thomas's curious face appeared, followed by Sarah's more hesitant one. "Can we see the baby now?" Thomas asked, his voice hushed with unusual restraint. "Come meet your brother," Isaac invited, helping them onto the bed. The children approached cautiously, their eyes wide as they took in the swaddled infant in Serena's arms. "He's so small," Thomas marveled. "And red," Sarah observed. "Is he supposed to be that color?" Serena laughed softly. "All babies are a bit red at first. He'll change color in a few days." "What's his name?" Thomas asked, reaching out to touch the baby's hand. The infant reflexively grabbed his finger, causing the boy to gasp in delight. Isaac and Serena exchanged a look. They had discussed names but hadn't settled on one, wanting to wait until they met their child. "What do you think we should name him?" Isaac asked the children. Thomas considered this seriously. "Nicholas for Christmas, or James," Sarah suggested quietly. After Papa's father, Isaac smiled. "Those are both fine names. What about James Nicholas Walker?" Serena nodded, looking down at the infant who was beginning to root against her chest, instinctively seeking nourishment. "James Nicholas it is. Welcome to our family, little one." As she guided the baby to her breast, watching in wonder as he latched on and began to suckle, Serena felt a completeness she had never known before. Their family, unconventional, unexpected, perfect in its imperfection, was exactly as it should be. Mrs. Jenkins and Dr. Miller departed once they were sure mother and baby were settled, promising to return the next day to check on them. Isaac settled the older children in their beds, then returned to sit beside Serena, his arm around her shoulders as they both gazed at their newborn son. "I never thought I could be this happy," Serena whispered. "God has blessed us beyond measure," Isaac agreed. "3 beautiful children, a home, each other. Remember when you said we'll fill our home another way? Did you ever imagine it would be like this?" He kissed her temple. "I couldn't have imagined anything this perfect." The snow continued to fall outside, covering the prairie in a clean white blanket. Inside, the Walker family slept peacefully, complete in a way they had never expected but had always hoped for. Their home was filled with love, the kind that grows with each new addition. multiplying rather than dividing, strong enough to withstand whatever challenges the future might hold. In the years that followed, the Walker Ranch thrived along with its inhabitants. Thomas grew into a fine young man with his father's way with horses and his mother's steady determination. Sarah blossomed into a confident young woman whose quiet strength belied the traumas of her early years. And little James, the unexpected blessing, grew healthy and strong, adored by his older siblings and parents alike. The town of Los Animas eventually came to see the Walkers not as an oddity, but as an example proof that family could be built on love rather than blood, that happiness could come in unexpected packages, and that even in the harsh realities of frontier life, miracles still happened. And on quiet evenings, when the children were asleep and the prairie stretched endless under a canopy of stars, Serena and Isaac would sit together on their porch swing, hands entwined, marveling at the journey that had brought them here to this place, to these children, to this life they had built together. Not the life they had planned, but the one they were meant to have all along.